So I've noticed, and I think you've described this as well, that in recent years it's become more fashionable to adopt certain kinds of religious practices, whether it's prayer or meditation, fasting, silent retreats, kind of activities like that. But what's the value in adopting a religious worldview and belief system instead of just the practices, which seem to have certain benefits in people's life?
Well, first of all, the practices, the fact that the practices have benefits, right,
Hmm.
is just by itself not a complete indicator, but an indicator that they probably connect to some actual true
Mm.
reality, right? So like if you
Hmm.
had a, if you had a set of diets turned out to be really good at helping people get fit and lose weight, right? You
Uh-huh.
wouldn't you would assume that those diets exist in some kind of like, actual relationship to the reality of biology and
Yeah.
chemistry, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a set of practices that seem to lead to greater human flourishing and people being happier in their relationships and creating more beautiful architecture and whatever list of benefits of religion, worldly benefits you want to have, um, you shouldn't just assume that that doesn't tell you anything about whether
Hmm.
religion is true. Yeah, I mean, sure, a sort of set of false beliefs could still yield beautiful architecture, right? Maybe that could be true.
I worry
Um,
about that, right? Gravity.
well, right, but even there, I mean, I think this is sort of a separate line of argument, but I think the serious religious person has to assume that there is some connection between truth
Hmm.
and beauty. And so, like, if you
Hmm.
think the ancient Greek architecture is beautiful, okay, you don't have to believe that the ancient Greek pantheon perfectly described, the hierarchy of the
Gotcha.
universe. But you can't
Yeah.
just say, oh, everything the ancient Greeks believed in was false, right? There probably
Hmm.
is some truth there, and I think that point extends right
Hmm.
beyond just that specific case, right? That there has to
Gotcha.
be some link between utilitarian effectiveness and actual connection to truth.
Hmm.
Um, but then that actual connection is important because what is religion for ultimately, right? Religion is
Hmm.
not just for building societies where people have happy marriages and take care of the poor and have nice architecture, right? It is preparing human beings for our actual relationship to ultimate reality, which
Yeah.
will be, if not consummated, at least changed in some profound way when we die.
Hmm.
And I mean, this is a very old-fashioned case for caring about the truth claims of religion, but I think it remains a potent and important one, right? Like,
Hmm.
if it is the case that there might be life after death, and I think there are good reasons for thinking that it might be the case, then in fact you should care strongly about what a particular religion says about that life after death, about how you prepare for it, what kind of life you might live in the context of either eternity or reincarnation or both. I mean, I think this
Hmm.
applies to Eastern and Western religions, both, right? That like there is a sense in which the kind of pragmatic case for religion almost isn't pragmatic enough, right? It's
Hmm.
like, can we? You should have some pragmatism about the eternal destiny of your soul, right? As
Yeah.
well as
Yeah.
as well as its immediate place in the American Republic circa 2025. But all
Sure.
of this does hinge on the idea that there are good reasons to think that the truth claims of religion map onto reality, right? So I'm
Hmm.
not just saying, well, there's an argument that goes something like this. It says, look, utilitarian benefits of religion are real, but you can't get those benefits unless you have the metaphysical beliefs too. So we should encourage the metaphysical beliefs because it's a package deal.
Yeah.
Maybe that's true, but that's not
Hmm.
enough. You actually
Hmm.
have to
That's right.
you have to go further, and you have to decide whether you think the metaphysical beliefs connect to reality in
Yeah.
some way, whether there's good evidence for that. I think there is good evidence for that. I think people should look at that evidence, take it seriously, and that ultimately is a better reason to guide your religious choices than this attempt to sort of build a really complex structure while you're indifferent to the foundation that it sits on.
Sure. Why do you think somebody should consider joining a large or larger enduring faith tradition and community instead of just picking and choosing elements from different traditions that suit them the most?
I mean, in part for just the same reasons that you would join something larger than yourself in any other area of human life,
Hmm.
right? This is sort of a simplistic argument, but I think it has truth to it, right? If you think that sports are really important, you can go in the backyard with a soccer ball and kick it around and, watch World Cup matches and have some kind of relationship to the game of soccer that way. But I think
Hmm.
everyone would agree that the person doing that has a less intense and meaningful relationship to the game of soccer than someone who goes out on the weekends and plays a pickup soccer game, to say nothing of
Hmm.
someone who joins a team, a club, and like makes it a deeper part of their life, right?
Yeah.
Um, there are arenas of human affairs where, the individual action is essential, right? Sports is a team game, but
Yeah.
let's say portrait painting. In the end, well, people have assistants working for them, right? But in the end, like the great artist is alone with his canvas. But do you become a great artist by just sitting in a room with a canvas painting all the time, or do you go to school? Do you
Yeah.
join, do you join a community? Does the Italian Renaissance happen in, sort of an individualistic vacuum, or does it happen in communities, schools? We talk about schools of art for a
Hmm.
reason, right? Like the communal and collective element, even of things that are done finally at the individual level, is really, really important. And you don't usually get to that individual genius point without going through a communal and collective
Hmm.
experience. So I think all of those points apply in pretty
Yeah.
obvious ways to religion. I
Yeah.
mean, just to take a simple example like prayer. Let's say you think prayer is really important, right? You should pray. There's probably a God. You should be in touch with God.
Hmm.
Are you more likely to pray if you are doing it entirely on your own in a system that you have invented and set up on your own, or if you belong to a religious institution that asks you to do certain set things that have been, built up over generations by lots of other human beings before you in ways that sort of are supposed to fit, the normal run of a human life. I mean, obviously there are individuals who aren't part of religious communities who pray a lot and have intense spiritual lives and maybe may stand in a better relationship to God than I do. I don't want to judge that. I'll
Hmm.
just say for myself that if I wasn't a Catholic and if the Catholic Church didn't say, you have to go to Mass every Sunday, no matter what's
Hmm.
going on, no matter how tired you are, how busy you are, you got to get to Mass. I would pray, 70% less in a given week
Uh-huh.
than I
Yeah.
do. Like so much of my actual attempts to connect with God are themselves connected to my church
Yeah.
saying, you got to be in church, on these occasions, saying the prayers then. And yeah, so again, that's personal. Everyone is different, but I think my experience generalizes to an awful lot of people. And then there's the one other point that I make in the book, which is connected to this, right? But like, if you think spiritual realities exist, there's no reason to think that they're all safe, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and again, like an individual person setting out to do something in the natural world, to explore, to go out into the American prairie or the Amazonian jungle, it would be very strange to say, I'm just going to do this, not going to take a map, not going to have any
Hmm.
guides, just gonna hang out in the Amazon, see what happens, right? Maybe good
Yeah.
things will happen.
Yeah.
But there are predators in the
Yeah.
Amazon. There are
Yeah.
hostile powers in the Amazon, and every major religious tradition, this applies to Buddhism and Hinduism as much to Islam and Christianity, has always taken for granted that there are things out there that we can call them demons, right? That are spiritual forces that don't have your good in mind. And
Hmm.
it's not the only reason to join an established tradition, but one thing the established traditions try to do is keep people safe and to make sure that they are doing their spiritual experiments and exploration in a structure where they're not just throwing themselves open to whatever spiritual forces might be out there that might not have their good in mind.